so much. Who would have believed the millions he would touch? How he touched our hearts, how he touched our hearts. Who would believe there'd be one man to do it? Who would believe in this one man's love? How we touched our lives together, how we touched our hearts.
Anyway, my grandfather, the point I'm making here with him, he taught me the value of $1, and that we had a cookie jar type of thing where he paid me, and I saved all my earnings that I worked for him in this cookie jar, and he made me consider and think about whatever I wanted to plan for ahead so I could be self-sufficient. For example, I wanted my first bicycle, and I didn't want to be dependent upon my parents to buy me a bicycle. So this was about in 1941, 1942. I was 10, 11 years old. I bought an Elgin bicycle with front suspension and real fancy thing, and my parents were very happy for me, but they just didn't understand exactly that I was able to do these things myself. And at that time and age, my grandfather told me to be self-sufficient, like I'd mentioned before, and I was able to buy my own clothing, what I wanted, Levi's shirts, shoes, whatever I wanted, not trying to be selfish as far as my parents were concerned or anything, or ignore them. I was grateful for what they did, but I was able to do for myself what I wanted without having to financially be supported by them. I was kind of an adventurous young man. And 3 of us guys decided, I think I was 15, we decided we were going to go to Los Angeles and get tattoos. And so we got together, it was Don Van Epps, and it was Dick Russo and myself. And I don't know if there was a fourth one or not, but at that time you could go up to Glen Oaks Boulevard in Burbank, get the red car, and ride into Los Angeles for a quarter.
What's the red car?
Red car is a streetcar, which was very prominent in those days. And you could actually get the red car, and you could ride for, I think, 50 cents all the way from Burbank clear down to Santa Monica Beach if you wanted to. But we only went as far as Los Angeles. And anyway, we went into this tattoo parlor, and I think the guy's name was Doctor something, and he had a fly. He was bald-headed and had a fly tattooed on top of his head. I'll never forget that.
Oh my gosh.
And we said we were 18, and we obviously didn't look it. But he didn't argue as long as we...
18?
Yeah, we said we were 18. And so Dick Russo, I think he wanted a tiger on the calf of his leg. So he got the tiger on the calf of his leg. And Don Van Epps, I think he got I think it was a snake or something on his arm. I'm not exactly sure what he got, but anyway, I thought the burl was appropriate. So I had a burl tattooed on my right arm. And then we decided we wanted to go to the Paramount to the movies. And the Paramount was a big theater in Los Angeles, and at that time you could go to the show. I think it was for about 50 cents, maybe 75. And and you went in there and you saw a vaudeville act before you saw the movie. And I saw Lionel Hampton, which is a xylophone player, world-renowned, and I saw another show. I think it was, I can't remember who the other performers were, but they were very prominent actors. And then we saw the show for 50 or 75 cents, and then we headed back to Burbank on the red car. So that was quite an adventure. And I got home, and Mom eventually saw the tattoo on my arm, and she started on at me, and I says, Mom, I know maybe I made a mistake, but get off my back or I'll have Mother put under it. And that was the end of it. I graduated from a junior high school at John Burroughs in 1947. And at that time, we had to go to Burbank High School, which was approximately 5 miles, and it was in the town of Burbank. I took basically wood shop, metal shop, and mathematics and that type of thing, and auto shop. My major was auto mechanics at that time. And in those days, it was kind of the survival of the fittest, to be tenacious and be able to protect yourself, because that's kind of the way it was in those days. 15 years old. And I had a very good friend by the name of Jerry Zorb. And Jerry Zorb was a very good athlete, very good baseball player, and a lot stronger than I was, even though I was a fairly strong fella. But he used to beat up on me every day just for practice. I can remember, and I remember this very, very strongly. One time he broke his leg playing baseball, and this was my opportunity to get even with him. We were out playing in his backyard, and he gave me a bad time, and I knocked him down, tripped him, and I took the baseball bat and beat on his leg and broke his cast all to hell. And that was my method of getting even with Jerry. But all in all, we were very good friends. But anyway, as time went on, eventually I graduated into a position where I was able to buy a car. And
Still in high school?
I was still in high school, because I had to travel from down in the valley, which was about 5 miles, to Burbank High School. So I bought a 32 Ford V8 coupe. And the first thing I did when David Redburn, who was the man who knew a lot about cars, supposedly was teaching me how to speed shift in my V8 coupe, is I dropped the transmission. So then I was in big trouble. I couldn't fix the transmission because it was too complicated. So I ran into a guy who traded me the 32 coupe for a 1931 Model A Roadster, which I definitely did not get the best of the deal. And the Model A had fenders on it and so forth, but I had friends in the body shop who's at the high school that said, well, okay, we can fix this thing up into being a real nice car, Jack. So Jack Chamberlain and myself, we took the fenders off the Model A, put a Dago axle on the front, Dago, that's a D-A-G-O, and dropped the front end 4 inches, took and put a 32 grill on it, put a Winfield head on the engine, downdraft carburetors, and a Mallory ignition, and this vehicle now would go like a bat out of hell. Except nobody knew how to put hydraulic brakes on it, on the Model A, so all we had was 2-wheel brakes. That was on the back. But anyway, that was my mode of transportation from Burroughs, where I went to junior high school, across the street, to Burbank High School. And along came the Korean War, and And I was walking out of the Carl's shoe store in Burbank one afternoon after work, and I had two of my friends, Jack Chamberlain and Marty Granghetto, were walking down San Fernando Road and saw me. And they said, "Well, Jack, where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm going home." And they said, "No, you aren't going home. You're going in the Army." And I
The other friend, Marty and who?
Marty and Jack Chamberlain. I said, "I'm not going in any army. I don't want to go in any army." He says, "Well, that's where you're going. You're going to be drafted. You're 1A. And I said, "Well, what do you mean? What are you guys doing?" He said, "Well, we're going in the Air Force." I said, "Well, how did that happen?" He said, "Well, Captain Smith, who was actually a professor, but he was a teacher at Burbank High School, was the head of this reserve Air Force unit, and that my skills in high school fit the MOS, which stands for Military Occupational Status, for his reserve unit. And I think that he can get you into our unit, and you won't have to go into the service." And I made a good judgment, and I went over and talked to him, and he did. He got me into to his unit, and it wasn't 10 days after this had happened that I got my notice to report for the Army. And it wasn't 3 weeks after I joined the reserve unit that I was in the Air Force and heading to Norton Air Force Base in Riverside in the Air Force. We shipped off out of LA to San Antonio, Texas, to Kelly Field. Now, Kelly Field was an Air Force base that was used during World War II and had not really been reopened until the Korean War started. And we arrived there in October. I'll never forget it. And Texas is a rather unusual place. The barracks there are 2 stories high and have a tin roof. And it was raining and hailing, something unbelievable. And I was assigned to a top bunk in one of these barracks, and they were most all the guys that were with us were young fellas just out of high school, or maybe a year, maybe 2 years at most in college. Well, when it started hailing, one of the guys was so frightened that he jumped out of the 2nd-story window of this barracks. He was all right. He was just absolutely blown away by the size of the hailstones. And they were so big that they actually dented the roofs of cars that were out in the open. And everything in Texas seemed to be bigger and worse than any place else in the world. That was my thought. And then we didn't have any time off until approximately, I would say 3 weeks after we were in there. And then we began to get a pass, and we could get off base for a few hours after work on Friday and so forth. And what we were regimented into, and all we could hear about in Texas is how fantastic Texas was and how terrible California was. So one of the fellows in our unit was an artist, and this kind of upset us a bit. So we decided that we'd take some pillowcases, military pillowcases, and we sewed them into a flag. And he made the California flag of the Republic out of these pillowcases. and very artistically wrapped it with rope and so forth and bound it so it could actually be used as a flag. Well, we decided we had a weekend off with a weekend pass of 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We went into the Alamo, took down the flag of the of the Republic of Texas, and raised the California flag of Republic over the Alamo, which definitely irritated the Texans to no end. And we made the front page of the San Antonio paper with a big photograph on the headlines of the paper of the California flag of the Republic being raised over the Alamo. So we took the Alamo. We're heading for Casablanca, North Africa. I think we were about 5 days, maybe a week on the ocean. We arrived in Casablanca, and a bunch of young guys looking down at the wharf in Casablanca and seeing all these Arabs was very scary, because we're from California. We've never seen anybody like this. And our job was to take and specifically maintain and develop all the motor vehicles to accommodate this objectivity. It did not function very well during the raining times, so you spent a lot of time in your tent playing cards or whatever. And I was fortunate enough to be in a 10-man tent with 3 of the fellows that I went to high school with. And that was a very interesting thing. There was Ed Dickey, Jack Chamberlain, and Marty Granghetto, and myself. Anyway, I think I mentioned to you earlier that I did quite well financially while I was in Casablanca, because I had actually a store where I sold cigarettes and whiskey, and also loaned money on a percentage basis. I had a cigarette and whiskey, and I could sell the whiskey for $5 a bottle and paid $2.50 a bottle for it, and cigarettes for $2 a carton and paid $1. Then I took the money and sent it to Tangiers, which was an international city, and I gained 20% on my investment in French francs, which earned me enough money to be able to take the only vacation I had while I was in the service, where 4 of us fellas decided that we would tour Europe. I was down visiting these friends of mine in Malibu. We had a house on the beach, and I'd gone to a jam session, which they were having on Sunday afternoon in Malibu with this friend of mine, Nicky Elfin. We just happened to go down there on a lark, and I was dancing with different people, having a good time, having a few drinks and so forth. And I met this beautiful lady, and we just really hit it off. She loved to dance, I loved to dance, and so forth. And so I happened to ask her, I said, well, do you live alone? And she says, well, yes, no, not exactly. I said, well, what do you mean, not exactly? Are you married? She said, no, I'm not married, but I have 2 children. And I said, well, I have 3. And when I told her I had 3 children, she practically abandoned me. And then she talked to the real good friend of mine, Nicky Elfin, and she thought I had abandoned the 3 children, and I was married. I had been married. And he said, no, he's really a good guy and really a good person. His wife had left him and left him with 3 children to raise. Oh, she said, really? And then that made a difference to her. And she was very, very warm, cold, but still standoffish a bit. And then we made arrangements. We went over, I think, to little Mexican restaurant and had a bite to eat and so forth. Later on in the afternoon, and I told her where I was staying and what I was doing and so forth down there, and I asked her if I could see her again, and she was somewhat reluctant to do that because I had 3 children, but she said yes, and so that is how we connected, and then I asked her out again. And I went down to Malibu again, and I met her, and I took her down to this friends of ours' house, Pete Nicolason and Jim Cessna's house on the beach, and we spent the day together and had a really good time, and that's how the relationship really got started. Leave off where Bill suggested that we move in together, and she would no longer pay for the rental house and so forth, and I wouldn't have to pay for a housekeeper full time, that she could get a job working for a doctor or whatever, and she did that, and I still kept my housekeeper for a period of time, but she moved in to our house in Burbank, and this time we still had a 2-bedroom house and 5 kids. So we had bunk beds in the bedroom that was 8 feet by 12 feet, and then we had another bed in there, and then we had another small bed for Kia, who was still in the bassinet, in our bedroom. Anyway, we made it work. Well, I decided that I had to take, and we were going to get married, and I was going to take and enlarge the house. Well, we got married in 1964, July 16th, and at that time a good friend of ours who worked with me at Utica Mutual Insurance Company had done some drafting and had some engineering experience and so forth. Well, he drew up plans for me to turn this 1,000 square foot house into a 2,100 square foot house, and that we would take out a loan at that time, and would make it work with the people I knew in town that were construction people. Okay, so we applied for the loan and set the plans in. The plans were accepted by the city of Burbank, and in 1964, shortly after we were married, I was laid off from Utica Mutual Insurance Company and no longer had a job. So now we had 5 kids, plans to remodel a house, and no job. So I applied for for unemployment benefits. I had already applied for my loan to remodel a house, and had gotten permission to borrow the money. I think it was $15,000 because I was gainfully employed at the time. So I got the permit to build the house then and got the $15,000 attic thing. So I decided to build the house myself. And then Jimmy, Patty's brother, came out of the service, and this was about 1964, or the early part of 65. He had been in the Navy, and he came to live with us, and he came in, and he was a carpenter knowledge, so he and I proceeded to do all the paneling and so forth on the interior of the house, and I'll do all the finished carpenter work. Now, he stayed with us for about 6 months or so forth, and then we had to pay a fella to come in and build a beautiful fireplace. But that's fine. That worked out real well. And the next door, there was an older couple named the Bartons. Now, by older, I mean they were probably in their 70s at the time, and they knew we had 5 children. They knew I wasn't working, and he worried about us all the time. I was always coming over. She would bring cookies and things over, afraid we weren't eating right. And he would always bring me these ads in the paper because he knew what I did for an occupation about going to work. Well, I couldn't go to work because I was building a house. So finally, about May of 1965, Mr. Barden came over with this ad in the paper from Farmers Insurance looking for a claims adjuster. So I said, okay, Mr. Barden. So I took the ad and I went down and I applied for the job. Went in there and talked to the manager, Bill Beener. He liked my demeanor. He liked my experience. And he said, okay, I'll hire you. And this was in May. And I said, well, Mr. Beener, I want to go to work for you, but I can't. I've got another month. I'm going to have to work on this house where I can finish up, where we can be livable. So he said, well, okay, Jack, that's the deal. You're very honest and straightforward about what the situation is. And then he met Patty, and then he was really well assured. So in June of 1965, I went to work for Farmers Insurance. And that was a start of a very, very long relationship. And as it went on, Patty was such a nurturing person, and as the kids grew up, Kip was very, very ill. We thought we were going to lose him several times. He had asthma so bad that he would turn blue in the face and blow up. It was just terrible. And they had him in an oxygen tent and so forth. And Patty was a very loving, domineering mother. But that isn't what he needed. He needed somebody that was structured and confident. And that's where I came in. I was rather stern with him, but understanding. And with my demeanor, I was able to build up self-confidence within him. And as time went on, he got better and better and better. And he had fewer and fewer asthma attacks. Now, Patty was very influential with Kirk. Kirk was like an extension of her. He was kind of a type A personality, and he was the other adult in the family. And he was like the glue. He kind of held all the kids at bay and kept things going in the right direction. Now, as time went on, Lance was the one who was never a bad kid, but he was always doing ornery things. And there was a boy down the street from him, his name was Bobby Bowler, and Bobby was about a year older than Lance. And Lance used to go down and antagonize Bobby Bowler, and Bobby Bowler turned around and beat the hell out of Lance. And Kirk and Kip were there when this happened, but their opinion that he deserved it, so they let it happen. So when I heard about it, I spanked the hell out of both Kirk and Kip and told them, don't you ever let your brother get beat up or things of that nature. You tend to it and you stick up for him. If he's wrong, we'll take care of him when he gets home and set things straight. So that's how that situation went. Okay, ready? Basically, in our relationship with my children, or our relationship, I should say, I tried to be fair but firm, and I had a fraternity paddle. I was the sergeant of arms in a fraternity at Glendale College, and therefore, whenever we got into an extreme conflict, I didn't expect one child to tell on the other, but I expected the person that had made the mistake to come forth and explain what they had done, and when we would discuss it with the boys, if the person who had made the infraction, if the one didn't come back and admit what they had done, the way I would handle the situation is I would bring all three of them in and spank all three of them. And then the one who had actually was the one who was the person who made the error, the other two would take care of it. And it seemed to work quite well. But anyway, one of the biggest things I want to mention here in my life is what a lovely woman I was married to. And when the children got into grammar school and so forth, she worked full-time for a doctor, Dr. Olson, and she'd get up early in the morning and she'd make breakfast for all 7 of us and pack a lunch for all 5 kids if they were all 5 going to school. And when they came home from school in the evening, she would have a lovely dinner. Now, how a woman is capable of doing that is unbelievable, but she was able to. And a lot of times, Patty and I may not agree on what was right and what was wrong concerning any decisions that had to be made by us. So we made a rule between the two of us that we never disagree in front of the children. Now, we may stay up and debate the issue till midnight before we went to bed, but we always presented a universal force between the two of us. We always joined together in whatever decision was made. And that made life work. But I went on to working with Farmers Insurance as a claims adjuster, handling mostly legal liability and that type of activity, and in actually helped train a gentleman who ended up being the president of Farmers Insurance. And that was a wonderful thing. Marty Feinstein was his name. And then in 1971, I was promoted into a unit consisting of 10 people, which was actually a unit that was dealing with people who committed fraudulent insurance claims and attorneys who participated in this type of activity. Now, the people I worked with were all men, and I was the youngest of the group, who were ex-Farmers Insurance claims managers, except myself. But I had had 20 years experience at that time, and they felt that I was capable of handling the job. The company also brought in all Superior Court lawsuits into Los Angeles area, and I was assigned 300 lawsuits, which I was to oversee and make financial decisions on the lawsuits concerning investigation that needed to be done, not doing it myself, medical background that needed to be done, and legal depositions and legal work that had to be done, and assisted in the law firm of Early Maslach, Ferran and Williams to do this. And as a result of this, I would attend court with our attorneys on probably 2 to 3 times a week, representing the insurance company and our policyholders concerning legal activity. Now, this type of thing was very, very successful, and we were able to take and put a lot of people who were involved in fraudulent activity in jail as a result of this. At that time, I was very close to an attorney in our office, Stephen Price, who we were out to dinner one night, and he said to me after dinner, we were having a few drinks at our house around the pool along with 3 other attorneys. He said, if you had your druthers, where would you like to live? And I said, San Luis Obispo, because we played tennis and traveled up there on occasion. A couple of the other attorneys said, well, 2 of them wanted to go to San Diego, and the other one liked Palos Verdes, where he presently lives, so nothing was changed there. I was now turning 50 in October, and I got a call from Steve Price, and he said, are you sure that you would like to live in San Luis Obispo? I said, yes, I would. I would love to live in San Luis Obispo. He says, well, I have a potential offer for you. They need somebody with your experience. You have over 20 years in the insurance claim and fraud division. And they need somebody now. The person died from being overworked in San Luis Obispo County. They need help. I can make arrangements that you could probably get the job, but you would probably have to leave within 30 days. I said, I think I can do that. I called Patty on the telephone. I said, how would you like to live in San Luis Obispo and move? She said, I got to go. I said, what do you mean you got to go? She says, well, I got to go start packing. I said, I'm serious. She says, I'm serious too. I think we're ready to make the change.
Who would have believed a man could do so much? Who would have believed the millions he would touch? How he touched.
When William know him older,
Yeah.
said he has a strong grandpa. Yeah. And he loves him very much. Be a big, handsome boy. Yeah. And he'd be a very honest citizen when he grows up. He know right from wrong, and will not be a juvenile delinquent. He'll have a good foundation under him, and a good education. Oh. Hey, you're going to punch your grandpa out. You keep bumping him in the mouth. You're going to hurt me.
Who would believe there'd be one man to do it? Who would believe in this one man's love? How he touched
Jack Morales.
our lives.
The Jack
Jack Morales.
Of all that is real. Who would have believed a man could do so much? Who would have believed the millions he would touch? How he touched our hearts. How he touched our hearts. be one man to do it? Who would believe in this one man's love? How we touched our lives together.